so much fun for me. So.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. And first of all, thank you for getting this done. I watched as people were completing, so I don't remember names or anything like that, but who was completing it. But I was watching, and there were a fair number of people that needed to fit it into their schedule more towards the end here than at the beginning. And but congratulations on getting it done. What you were able to do right after you finished was look at your report. So you could look and read all the results and everything. But my job today is to really help you understand those results, because really what this is going to be about is how do you apply this information about natural talents, natural abilities to you in leadership positions. You are already in leadership positions. But you are looking to be perhaps in other leadership positions. And so the better you know yourself, the better able you are to leverage the talents of the people around you also. So that's really our goal. Now, how many of you were absolutely surprised by everything that you read? Oh, thank goodness. Because that would scare me a little bit. That would mean that you really didn't know much about yourself. And I think that you can't get to this level of leadership without having some self-awareness and some understanding. But what I hope to do with you today is take it to the next level. Let's refine this even more. For example, there are probably 6 different ways to be a people person. Okay, so when somebody says, I'm a people person, exactly what does that mean? And so that's the kind of information we're going to help you just refine and understand so that you can better manage yourself. Now, I want to work with the end in mind. So what you have to know is at the end of our session today, there will be an activity where I will ask you to put this all together, and everybody's going to stand up for 1 minute, about a minute, and just review, give a little summary about what, and a summary and what you would like to take away with you and perhaps work on. Yay, everybody's excited about that now, right? But we're going to do that, I'm going to make it very easy for you to do that as we go through here, because you'll be having opportunities to write things down as we go, so when we get to the end, it'll just be really quick. Also throughout, I will hope that you will ask questions. You'll have opportunities to work with a partner to talk through this information, because we know with adult learning, just sit and get, well, it's really with human learning, sit and get isn't the route to go. So we want opportunities to sort of talk about everything. So you may remember that the overall purpose of taking the Highlands Ability Battery is really to enhance your leadership development by knowing your leadership talents. Secondly, to enhance team development. Thirdly, to enhance leadership communication. And overall, that enhances school system leadership. So that's the big umbrella picture. For today, here are the objectives. Number 1, I really want you to get clear on what do you bring to any situation. What is it that you bring? And I want you to be able to clearly express that. Okay? The second thing is, understand the difference between your natural abilities and your skills. And we do that we talk about the difference between abilities and skills in terms of time, effort, and energy. And what I didn't tell you all was that in front of you, there's a copy of the PowerPoint right here, and it has notes on it. So if you want to follow along as we go, you're welcome to write notes on the PowerPoint there. All right. The third objective for today is to really take a look at and be aware of blind spots. Now, when you have a strength, honestly, there's good news and there's bad news. All right? And the good news is how well you can use that strength, and the bad news is the blind spot that it that was not staged. The bad news about having that significant strength is that sometimes it just seems so natural to you that you can't imagine that everybody else doesn't do that too. And so that creates that blind spot. So we want to have some awareness about that. Fourthly, we want to create a common language. And when I say a common language, I know a lot of assessments talk about that. But this is a way of describing workplace differences without judgment. It's very objective. All right, and that, when you can talk about these differences in an objective way, and it's not just glossing over, it's not just making lemonade out of lemons, it's really understanding what the difference is and what value it brings to any situation. That's what we want to do, and as leaders, you're looking for that. And lastly, apply what you learn, because as you go through not only this program, but as you continue to go through professional development, you're always going to want to be looking for ways to grow. So that's part of what we're doing today. All right, just as a disclaimer, I know that there's more to your leadership style that goes into your style than just abilities and skills. I understand that there are all these elements to you. We call this the whole person model. And everybody has different values. Everybody has different interests. Everybody has different goals. They get mushed in with your abilities and your skills. They integrate into that to create what's going to feel like a really good fit for you in your work life and in your personal life. But the parts that we're going to be focusing on today are the difference between abilities, which are the things that come naturally, which take the least amount of time, effort, and energy on your part, which don't require you to practice them to maintain them. They're always available to you. And we're going to differentiate them from skills. And the skills are things that you learn how to do. Right? We all want to continue to acquire skills. It would be very boring if we never acquired or learned anything else. So at the end of the day, your performance is always a combination of your abilities and your skills together. And nobody else cares if you're working from an abilities base or skills base. All they care about is performance, right? Who it matters to is you. So that's how this becomes a self-management tool. That's how the Highlands Ability Battery becomes a self-management tool. Making intentional choices about how to spend your time, effort, and energy. Because as leaders, you get less and less of that time. You have more and more responsibilities that you can't even anticipate how much time it's going to take, right? How many of you came from the classroom into assistant principal and thought, oh, well, there can't be that much to it. I mean, you know, did anybody come into that position that way? Oh, you're looking at me like I have an eyeball in the middle of my head or something. Well, you all had some awareness of what you were getting into. Did you fully appreciate that until you got into it?
When you say fully appreciate, what do you mean?
Fully appreciate the demands of the position.
No, not until I got into it.
Right? When you get into it, you get a different perspective. When you get into it, you start saying, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I had no idea what was going on in other places in this building, right? I had no idea about the connection of this building with the whole rest of the system. I mean, I know it exists, I know it's important, I know we're all in it together, but seeing how that works, right? You get a whole different perspective. So those are the kinds of things that start occupying you more and more as you continue in leadership. And if you were to go into a principal's position, it's even more. So having this awareness of how to manage yourself and your own time, effort, and energy becomes key. All right, so what we're going to be doing is going to talk about natural abilities. And I showed you this quote last time, right? Marty Seligman? You all know Marty Seligman? He's considered the father of positive psychology. You know, he has something called signature strengths, and what he says is, basically he says, you can't be great at everything, pay attention to your signature strengths. Leverage those, because you can put a lot of effort into trying to be great at everything, and it just siphons off your ability to use your natural strengths. So all the things that you've done between StrengthsFinder and now this is really this encouragement of leveraging your strengths. It doesn't mean that you don't always want to be focused on continuous improvement, but there's more than one way to continuously improve and think that you have to be the one that does it all. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through your Highlands Ability Battery report. So the best way to do that is to have your report out available. Probably turn to the bar chart page. The PowerPoint sort of follows along as we go through each ability. So you're welcome to take notes on the PowerPoint. You're welcome to take notes in your report. You know, your reports are always available to you through that portal. So if you mark this up and you want to print yourself a new copy, it's there for you always, okay? All right. I'm introducing this concept of working with a learning partner. So there are going to be 2 or 3 times that we're going to pause and take a break and let you talk to a partner about your results. Like how is this working for you? What are some examples that you can come up with to share with a partner? Because I think that you all can learn a lot from each other, and you can learn what it's like not to be you. That's key, learning what it's like not to be you, okay? So I just want to tell you that there will be places that we're going to have you talk to a partner at your table, which is why I was grouping you into groups of 4 there. And as we go through your results, what you probably remember is that there were these scores, right? And if you look at that bar chart on the right-hand side is your percentile ranking score. And that's you relative to the other people in the database. It's not the percent right or wrong. The scores then get described in your report as falling in the low, mid, and high range. So the low range is anything up to and including the 35th percentile. The mid range goes from the 36th to the 64th, and the high range goes into the 65th percentile. Now, let me ask you an honest question. How many of you, first thing, you look at your bar chart and you think, okay, how many did I get, in the high range? And like specifically at least 890 or above, right? Because that's an A. Right? And how many of you then quickly then looked at the low range and oh, what did I fail? Right? Right. Well, so what I told you when I came here to introduce this, and what I want to reinforce again, high is not good and low is not bad. High is not good, low is not bad. There are strengths and challenges associated with all 3 parts of the continuum. And you're looking at me like, yeah, right. Okay? But I promise you, as we go through this, you're really going to have a better appreciation of this. When you look at your bar chart, that little hash mark is your score. And let me just explain this. I view your score as falling on a continuum. That's a continuum, right? And that score is your home base. So think of that score as home base. It's your starting point. And the reason why that's important is because I'm not saying that you don't move away from that. I'm not saying that that's deterministic of how you perform all the time. But that is home base. And what we know about home base is this. Under pressure, under stress, guess where we go? Home. Okay? So it's good to know where you will go back to that so that you can be super aware of this. Make sense to you? All right. So on your bar charts, it's divided into these 3 sections: your personal style, your driving abilities, and your specialized abilities. And we're going to start off with personal style. And the first dimension under personal style is this thing called Generalist Specialist. Now your scores are broken onto 2 lines. All right, if you notice, they add up to 100. So you can't be at the 60th percentile on both of them. All right, Generalist Specialist was measured by the work samples where you were given a word and you wrote the first word that came to mind. That kind of free association. Well, the way this works is that generalists will supply the same other word. So if you give the word table, all the generalists might say chair. Okay? Generals speak a common language. They share a common perspective. They can approach a group, and there will always be some number of other generalists in that group, and they can anticipate how those other generalists will react to things because it's similar to their reaction. Generalists also, what this dimension also measures is not only this natural response to group dynamics, but it also measures whether you prefer to take more of a broad brush approach to information or an in-depth approach. So guess what generalists do? Huh? They like that mile-wide, foot-deep approach. That's where they start. They really like to know the lay of the land. And that also means that they really enjoy a lot of variety in what they do, right? Because they're going to jump from job to job and task to task as long as they can see how it helps move the group forward. Okay? It doesn't mean their perspective is right, but it is similar to the other generalists. And so sometimes it can feel like, oh, this whole group is thinking this way, so we must be right. Not true. Not true. All right. On the other end of this continuum of your natural response to group dynamics and whether you like to go broad or deep are the specialists. Now, the way the specialists responded to those words was with unique answers, different answers. So if you have the word table, one specialist might say chart, another specialist might say mahogany, another specialist might say Dalmatian. Okay? So they don't speak a common language. They have a unique perspective where they have to sometimes spend extra time when they're talking to a group is explaining their point of view because it's not the quote-unquote common point of view. Okay? Specialists really prefer not to have to know a little bit about everything. What specialists really prefer is to know a whole lot about one thing. Okay, so in your reports, if you came out as a specialist, it will say that you take a foot-wide, mile-deep approach to information. That's your starting point. Where generalists find it very easy to work through and with others and to work on interdependent tasks, specialists really prefer to work autonomously and independently. They like to develop expertise, have something that's just theirs, that they hold on to. Nobody else touches their stuff, thank you very much, until they have it done. And then they like to bring it to the group to use. All right, it's not that they can't be part of a team. I'm never mentioning the word team here, but the way you work on a team will be different. All right. Then you have the people in the mid-range. So you can fall in the mid-range here. Mid-range folks, so they have this wonderful capacity for being sort of bridgers and translators between the generalists and the specialists. Because you know what? If I'm a strong generalist, it's kind of challenging for me to relate to that person way over on the other side, the specialist. And if I'm a specialist, I'm scratching my head about that generalist sometimes. Like, why do they always have to do things together, you know? But the person in the mid-range really is part generalist and part specialist, so they're great at translating to the other group. They frequently find themselves in roles where they are translating and facilitating between the generalist and the specialist. How they do that will be dependent on their introversion, extroversion score, but they see that. Now, what's really fun is that those people in the mid-range not only translate, and it's easier for people at each end to relate to them in the middle, but they can relate to both of them. They have both perspectives. So what could possibly be the downside of being in the mid-range?
People view you as, you choose one side of the other.
You can't take a stand.
You can't take a stand.
Like you can't take a stand, right? Like they don't know how you're going to show up.
Right.
Okay? So, wait a minute, over there you were saying, you know, that. Oh, over here you're going to say. So it can be somewhat kind of confusing, okay? But the real downside is this. If you're in the mid-range, the way you approach your work is both a mile wide and a mile deep. And the reason why that's a problem is because there are not enough hours in the day to be the expert in everything. Not going to happen. So the skill building for the person in the middle is learning how to prioritize. Which things will I allow myself to go deep into? And let me just give you a very concrete example. Whether you came out of a certain background for content as a teacher, or whether you're doing something right now as an AP and you become very familiar with it, when you go to the next level, guess what? You'll gravitate to doing the things that you know how to do first. Okay? And it's real difficult to let go of those things. And you're going to have to. You're going to have to. So whether you're the specialist right now, and you have the specialty, and now you've got to have the broad range responsibilities, or whether you're that generalist and all of a sudden in the leadership position, you've got to get very highly specialized in some personnel issues or, you know, whatever. I mean, you will have to go in a different direction. But if you're in the mid-range, you're going to have to give yourself permission not to know everything, not to be the expert in everything. Now, I wanted to share with you all what this group looked like. And let me explain who's in this group. It's everybody here, but the rest of cabinet that's not here. All right? And in the middle of your tables is a frequency chart that these percentages come from. So you can see the actual number of generalists and specialists. So when you put everybody in the same pot, in the same group, we have almost half of the group that are generalists. We have 29% that are specialists. We have 25% in the mid-range. That translates to 11 generalists, 7 specialists, and 6 in the mid-range. Does that surprise you? You don't know. Anybody surprised?
No.
I would think people be more special because then y'all specialize in one particular area.
Okay.
What
So
area?
here's
What
the
area?
thing.
Education.
Oh,
I'm just thinking as an AP, we've got 1,000 different jobs and we gotta know how to do a little bit of all of them.
Right.
that's right.
Yeah, you gotta be that. I mean, you're bouncing into personnel decisions with the principal over here, but then you're putting in an air conditioner work order over here.
And aren't they the same?
Instruction is in there too, you know, you gotta.
Yes, yes. So the thing is that even wherever you are on this continuum, wherever your starting place is, can generalists ever become detail-oriented and learn something and become experts? Absolutely. But what you should know is that you can do that, and you will do that, but you don't want to spend 70% of your day in the weeds like that. Okay? And if you're a specialist and you're managing a group of people, and I'll tell you right now, I work with a lot, over the past 20 years, I've worked with a lot of education administrators. I have many of them that are specialists, they're in leadership positions, and you know, the way that they work that is that they manage everybody, they manage everything, but they always have one thing on the side that's just theirs. That's their baby. That's their baby, at least for a year, right? And then they give it up, and then they find their next project that they're pulling out of the earth that's just theirs, that they get to create, and then they give it up to the group, pass it along to the group. So there are ways to manage this that makes your position, some people are nodding their heads like they can resonate with this. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just want to be clear, so you're basically saying that the mid-range are the best, right? I just want to be clear one time.
You know, it's hilarious because I think like everybody, whatever zone that they're in, they're like, yeah, that describes me. My range is the best, right? My zone's the best. And it really, I guess the fun part about this is once you know this about yourself, then you know what to look for in your work, right? There's more than one way to do every single person's job. Right now, all of you who are APs are in AP positions, but do I think for one red hot second that you're doing it exactly the same? Oh no. And the positions aren't exactly the same because of the environment, because of, you know, the different schools that you're in. You have overriding responsibilities that might be similar, but guess what? There's a lot of flexibility in how you accomplish the work. Okay, so we're going to blend this with the next personal style characteristic, the introversion extroversion. And the introversion extroversion was the 30 questions or so at the end where you said, would you rather do this or that? Did you like or dislike certain activities? Okay, well here's the thing. Most people have heard the term introvert and extrovert before, right? How many of you have done some other measure, the Myers-Briggs or anything, right? Okay, so you've heard these terms. People throw them out there all the time. Well, the way that we really define introversion, extroversion is with two things, energy and thinking. Okay? Energy-wise, this is what gives you energy and what takes it away. So those of you that came out as strong extroverts are energized by other people. That gives you energy. What takes energy away from an extrovert is having to be by yourself for long periods of time. So this is usually the time that most extroverts will say, now wait a minute, I can be by myself for a long time. So let's define a long time. If you asked an extrovert what a long time is, it might be, an hour, 2 hours, okay? Introverts will say a month, okay? That's a long time alone. If you ask an extrovert could they be by themselves, would they enjoy being by themselves, like no human contact for a whole day? They're like, oh, are you kidding me? No. All right? So what you think about are the tasks that you have to do. So when you're thinking about working on budgets or reports, if you're an extrovert, what you want to do is you want to build in people breaks because it'll give you more energy to finish the work. All right, now introverts are self-energized. Introverts get energy from themselves, and what depletes them is spending long periods of time with lots of other people. So they can be around other people, they can be social, they can say the right things, but what's happening internally is that their energy is depleted. It's hard sometimes for extroverts to understand that. And it's hard sometimes for introverts to understand that an extrovert would actually get tired from being by themselves. Like, whoa, how does that happen? All right? So the other thing that I mentioned that this affects is thinking. All right, extroverts process their information, think through things best by talking. Okay? You hear their thought process. They think out loud. Introverts do their best thinking quietly in their head before they say something. It's not that if you're asking them factual information that they won't just immediately give you an answer, but if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to approach a dilemma, introverts want to sit back and think through it, and an extrovert launches into talking about it. Oh, wow, isn't that an interesting problem? There are a lot of different things we could do. I mean, one thing we could do is we could go run a focus group and get everybody together, but that might be hard to schedule, so we went with that. So that's the extrovert approach. And the introvert approach is like, and they're going to think and think, and then they come out with a fully cooked answer. So let me just tell you that there are huge misunderstandings about this. And the most important part about this for you is I want you to understand how you might be perceived by other people as a leader. Because when you get into leadership, you have more eyes on you, and they're listening more to what you say. They're not agreeing with you. I'm not suggesting that. But I am saying they're watching you more, they're listening to you more, and they're going to make attributions to what you're doing and saying. So if they don't understand it, they're going to fill in the gap of not understanding with something that's in their head, which is often an insecurity. So, the introvert, who is the leader that's an introvert, that is being quiet during a meeting and not saying anything. What are some of the things people might, what attributions might they make to an introverted leader who's being quiet? Not engaged.
Yeah, just don't care.
Don't care. They don't care, they're not engaged, they don't like me, they disagree with me,
Disrespect my opinion.
they disrespect my opinion. Or, so these are all the attributions that will be made to you introverts unless you say something about yourself. Extroverts. Let me just tell you that as you're going through your thought process out loud, what are some of the attributions that you think are being made to you?
You know it all.
You don't know what you're talking about. You keep changing your mind. You just like to hear yourself talk. You don't care about what anybody else has to say, right? So these are all the attributions. What a flake, you know? What a flake. So important that in leadership you learn to tell people about yourself. It's important for extroverts to say things like, I'm just thinking out loud, or I need to talk through this before I decide, because what will happen is when you're in leadership, people are trying to please, they're trying to do what you want, what they think you want them to do, and they will run out and do the first thing out of your mouth. And then you will go, why did you do that? And they'll say, but you said. So they don't understand the difference. What I will explain to extroverted leaders is that you should invite people to ask you. If you're not sure of whether I'm telling you, ask me. But I feel like it's your responsibility also to put it out there that you're just thinking out loud. For the introverts, I think it's really important that you let people know things like, you know, I just need a little bit more time to process this. If you want my best answer, I need to get back with you. Or I'm fully engaged in meetings, but the way I engage is by listening first. Ask me a question at the end. Okay? You can do things like that. I'm not saying you can do that 100% of the time, but you can do that more often than you think. And people will appreciate that as an introvert, you don't just spit out an answer and then come back the next day and say, well, now that I've thought about it. They don't appreciate that. Yeah?
Does the individual's comfort level with the group play into the continuum here?
Oh, sure, sure. Not only and the size of the group. So, yes, all of those things can come into play, for sure. Because I have extroverts that will say, I don't say anything at first. I'm getting a lay of the land. Or I have introverts that say, you know, I've just thought about it, I'm going to go in, I'm just going to say it. You know, that's being intentional. Like that takes intention on your part to operate opposite of how you normally would. Yeah. Yes, we have people in the mid-range. Yes, so you have people in the mid-range, and the people in the mid-range need a blend of both. Like they require a blend of being with people and being alone to maintain their energy level. So in leadership, what can be confusing about that is that at one part of the day, you're all excited about seeing people and you're interacting and that sort of thing, and then you move to another part of the day and you're like got your door locked, closed, bolted, no calls, right? And then you get tired of that and then you're with other people again. So you have that kind of back and forth. And so again, the most important thing for a leader is to say what's going on. You know what, I've just gotten out of 3 back-to-back meetings, I need 5. I need 5. You just tell people about yourself. People want to know what to expect from their leaders. Okay, so what do you think about this group? I figured I was going to have a pretty tough day today, having to be up here and everybody looking at me and not saying anything. That's what I thought, as introverts. Right? So let me just point one more thing out, because you all, you know, you have almost 2/3 introverts in this whole group. Introverts really appreciate having agendas to meetings. Introverts really appreciate being told in advance what you want to come talk to them about. And that's so that they can be thinking before you get there, so that they can be prepared to have an engaging conversation with you. So I want you to think about that as you work with your teachers and back in your buildings, and then as you move into principal positions, you're going to run into the same thing. All right, so just kind of keep that in mind. The extroverts can appreciate an agenda, and they probably won't engage in it until they're at the table, at the meeting. All right. Now, you can put these two things together. And in your reports, I think it's somewhere, what page is that in your reports, I think? Page 10?
No,
9, 10, right around there. There's a disc that shows all the different combinations, and then there on the next page is your result. So let me show you what this looks like. You could have one part of this disc highlighted. For example, the administrator, the generalist introvert. What that says is that that's your starting place. That's your natural style. It would be relatively easy for you to skill build into the networker and into the detailed researcher style. Those would be relatively easy skills to learn because you have something in common with those other styles. So as an administrator, a generalist introvert, what you would have similar to a networker is the generalist part. If you're an administrator, generalist introvert, you could also fairly easily move it into the detailed researcher style because what you share in common there is the introversion. But the style that would be the most effortful for you is on the diagonal, becoming the specialist extrovert because you share no common attributes with that style. So some of you have one part of the disc highlighted, and some of you have two parts of the disc highlighted. Two parts of the disc are highlighted when you fell in the mid-range on one of those scores. But what I want you to know and what I want you to understand is in executing your roles and responsibilities, the more you can take on that's congruent with your style, the more enjoyable that work is going to be. And guess who you might want to surround yourself with? Oh, the people that are not like you. Because guess what? If everybody is an administrator, a generalist introvert, everybody wants to do the same things, and everybody doesn't want to do the same things, the other things. And if you have somebody that's your complement, you kind of cover the bases. Does that make sense to you? Who here works with somebody right now that they know is pretty much opposite them? Okay, let me ask you about that. Is it always easy to work with them? Sometimes it's tough, right? But in terms of getting the work done,
yes.
does the work get done? Right? So guess what? In leadership positions, your job is to get the work done. That's your job. Okay, so what I did was I put these little charts up about these styles. And what I want you to do is I want you to move yourself around the room around these charts. Okay? So we have the generalist introvert in the back, and we have the generalist extrovert up front. We have the specialist extrovert up front over here. We have the specialist introvert in the back here. And if you're in between, just put yourself in between the two. So let's get up and move around. Okay. So isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? I mean, for one thing, what we have is at least we have representation in the four main corners, right? We even have people, and in the middle. Look, we have the versatile length here. All right? We're a little light over here on the networker. That's because we had so many introverts. Okay? But if I looked at this as a team, I'd say this is a pretty good team. Are you just having fun and joining him there? are you really there?
He's really there.
You're really there. Okay, all right. So here's what can happen. If you have a whole bunch of people that are in one place and you're working as a group, sometimes it can feel like they're right because there's so many. And so that's what you want to watch out for. We want to make sure that we have opportunity for all group members to weigh in so that we have that representation. It's even tougher when that majority is extroverted because they're going on. They're going. All right? All right. So here's what you need to know. Your all's best friends are them. Your all's best friends are them. And vice versa. Okay? Y'all, this side, meet that side. Now, did anybody notice that we have one person in the middle? So here's the thing with the versatile link. If she's working with a networker, she will likely fall into a detailed researcher role because it creates a counterbalance. If she's working with a detailed researcher, she'll move in to take up these responsibilities as the networker. She is the counterbalance, naturally. Everybody in this room in leadership wants to counterbalance. You want to be able to move into these different styles when you need to, but you have to be quite intentional about it. It happens naturally for her. Okay, you can go back to your seats. We have one more element of personal style in here, which is this thing called time frame orientation. Time frame orientation is something that most people, it's not a common measure. It's not one that most people have heard of before. It's a measure of how far out in the future your mind most naturally goes. What amount of time does your brain take into account when it's solving a problem right now, when it's making a plan for right now? And so what we have are 3 zones. This is one dimension that I think is critical for leaders to be able to move up and down on. It doesn't matter where you start. You need to be very intentional about moving yourself into the other zones. Here's why. For those of you that have a more immediate time frame, so those are people that scored in the low range on this, it's very easy for your brain to wrap around the here and now, out 6 months, up to a year. You like to see immediate results. You like to get those rewards. And I don't mean always for yourself. It can be for your school, for your staff, for other people. Like you like to see that connection. If you think about the work of most schools, what's the schedule of most schools? It's a year, right? It's a 1-year time frame. So when you have an immediate time frame in education, so many of your roles and responsibilities clearly fall into that 1-year zone. It fits really well. When you move into the mid-range, this is somebody who is thinking out 1 to 5 years in the future. And you know, as you move into leadership, you get some of those responsibilities. Like there are certain things that get put onto your plate that are going to require you to think out beyond a year. You start thinking about budgets. When you become a principal, you start thinking about the climate and the culture of the school. Those are not things that change in a year, right? So the short term, the more immediate things don't go away, but you have some longer range responsibilities that get added that you absolutely have to pay attention to. Okay? For people that have a long time frame orientation, their brains are thinking 5 and 10 and 20 years into the future. So what people with the mid to long time frame, the way that they think is backwards. It doesn't mean they have a plan with all the steps laid out, but it means that they'd like to have a target out there. It's the distance of the target. And for people with the with the intermediate or long range, they like having that more distant target and they like the feel of making progress toward that target. It's not achieving it necessarily. it's making that progress. So here's what's important to know. As leaders, if you are working with a group of people, you will have people that fall into all three zones. For you to relate to them, it's critical that you include information that people in the immediate, intermediate, and long range will relate to. So, it's very easy for a person who has an immediate time frame to talk about where do we want to get by the end of this year? What are our goals for this year? But if you're talking to a longer time frame person, they're thinking, yeah, but where's that going to take us after that? What is this leading to? They need to hear what the more distant target is to feel like they're connected to the work. And if you're a leader that has a long time frame, some of the things that you have to watch out for, mid or long time frame, is this. You can have your eye on that future target and not reward in the here and now, not acknowledge in the here and now, not break the long-term projects into the shorter, more manageable ones for the people with the more immediate time frame. Because if you keep your eye, I've had a administrator explain it to me this way. She said, I have this long time frame and I'm future oriented and I'm looking at the future. And when I look at the progress that we make, everybody wants to do the happy dance when we're down there on the 10-yard line. And all I can think of is we've got 90 yards to go. And that's true, but it's also true that it's important to acknowledge what's happening now in these smaller steps to keep people going along with you. All right? So in this group, look what we have. We have 62% in the long range. We have 17% immediate, 21% intermediate. If there is a blind spot in this group, it's about always looking forward, and you have to really make yourself think about, but how do I break that long-term goal into these shorter, more manageable, achievable pieces, and put each piece out in front of people as we go, and get excited about that. Does that make sense to you? All right, so if you have a long time frame, stand up. Okay, so these are the people that are thinking really futuristically. They can see that. I'm not saying they don't break things down right now, but I'm just saying that's their orientation, okay? You all will benefit from working with people in a different zone. Okay, so sit down. So who are the people in the intermediate range? Remember, we don't have everybody here today, but okay, so these are our intermediate, 1 to 5 years. Okay, sit down. Who are our immediate? Okay. Yes. So I think the most important thing is to know where you start on this continuum, to know what your blind spot might be. I might overlook, acknowledging those short-term gains. I might not break it down into small enough steps, and so forth, as a leader. And if I have the more immediate time frame, it's like, okay, I need help putting all that together. I can understand that long-term goal, but I don't necessarily put that in the front of my mind all the time, because I'm right here, dealing with this. So it's good to have that as a reminder and a person to remind me. Okay? So what questions do you have on personal style? Yeah.
So you may have said this, but the battery assessment that measured this one, can you tell us again how that one played into that?
Yes.
Was it the number of words? The
Yes.
type of words? Okay.
Yes. So here's how it works. A lot of people look at this and think it's going to be idea generation. Because you're asked to think about, write down how many things, nouns, does any one of these individual line drawings remind you of? And so what we find is that your score on time frame doesn't always equate to a person's score on idea generation. And back in the day, when Johnson O'Connor, who was kind of the starter of this aptitude assessment, he was looking at this as an alternate measure of idea productivity, and the scores weren't correlating. So what you find is that people that have a more immediate time frame approach this as, okay, you asked me what it reminded me of, here's the task, I did it, I'm ready to move on. They stop. That's it. So it had to do with how you utilized your time. Right? It's different, the task is also different from the idea productivity where you're given a full 5 minutes to write about one thing. These were, I don't know how many, 8 or 10, pictures, these little simple line drawings, and it's just like, okay, how about this? Okay, how about this? And so it was looking at how you used your time. Good question. Other questions? All right, you ready to move on to your, here's the part where you get to talk to a partner. So what I would like you to do, there's some lines on that PowerPoint if you want to take any notes about this that will be useful to you at the end. But I'd like you to spend 5 minutes just talking with a partner here about your personal style. What about your personal style feels like it's a strength to you? How are you using it? What are some examples of where you're using it? And what might be some of the challenges of any element of your personal style? Okay, so you have 5 minutes to talk to a partner about this. Okay, so what we have done is we've talked about personal style. But the next thing that we move into are the driving abilities. They're also called reasoning abilities. Right? These are ways that your brain is working automatically. You're not telling your brain to do these things. This is what your brain does. And when you're aware of what your brain does, then you can tell it to do different things. But it's really important to know what it's doing to begin with. So let's start with the first one. Classification. Classification is the work sample where you have the rows of pictures, and then you put, I'm already getting reactions. You had to pick 3 that had something in common. All right. This is considered diagnostic problem solving. It's the ability to take seemingly unrelated pieces of information, pull it together quickly, and see a solution. It is a nonverbal way of solving a problem. It's very fast. It's seeing a pattern very quickly in whatever you're looking at. Okay? Think if this is diagnostic problem solving and it happens quickly, think of sort of like an emergency room doctor, right? I see a few symptoms, I have to be able to put it together quickly, solve, and know what it is. So it's it's a type of convergent reasoning, a way of coming up to a conclusion, a solution, right? Converging on an answer. The thing is when you're in the high range on this classification ability, what it says is that you love having lots of different types of problems to solve. That can happen in a chaotic environment. That can happen in a very fast-paced environment. All right? But the joy comes from figuring it out. Okay, I got it. Now give me the next one. Okay, I got it. Give me the next one. Like there's this thrill that goes along with it. People that are in the high range on classification really like a blank slate approach to their work. Like they don't like you to tell them much structure to how they should solve. They just want a blank page. They like the idea of, here, take this and run with it and figure it out. Okay? And they love that. Okay? they really, it doesn't necessarily mean that they enjoy the implementation of those solutions. For them, that's slower. And the joy comes from jumping to the next problem to solve. So sometimes what goes along with having this high classification can be, number one, a little bit of internal sense of impatience with other people because they don't get it as quickly as you. All right? It can also result in kind of skipping over some of the details that can sometimes slip through the cracks and could ultimately sabotage you if you're not careful. So people with this strong classification usually have to work hard at finding ways to slow themselves down, finding a safety net to check for the details, or relying on some other people that will do that part. Okay? Now, solving the problem doesn't mean that you can explain how you knew that that was the answer or what, exactly how you came to that conclusion. You need the next ability for that. But this is this rapid, I come to the conclusion quickly and then I'm ready to move. At the low end of the continuum, the low end of the continuum are people who, number one of your gifts is patience. Now, I'm not saying patience for cranky, rude, unmotivated people. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you would have the patience to develop a skill in yourself. You would have the patience to develop other people. You are thrilled if you're the one that comes up with a solution, but you don't have to be the one that comes up with it. It's just that it gets solved. You would have more patience for the implementation many times than the person at the opposite end of the continuum. And in all honesty, you like structure to your work. Like, you want to be given the parameters. Don't just give me a blank page. Like, give me the parameters, not micromanage. But if you want me to do a project, when is it due? Who else is working on it? What is the budget? What are the regulations I need to look at? So what you will do is you will have the patience to ask questions. Typically, people at the low end ask questions in order to get the structure around the work that needs to be done. Now, the people in the mid-range are the people who, they're sort of, give me the general parameters. I don't mind if a fire pops up, but I don't want it 24/7. I do not want emergencies all the time. That is not fun to me. The only people that's really kind of fun to are the people at the high end. All right, now I hope one of the things that you can appreciate is that when people are at opposite ends on this particular ability, they can really if they only focus on what's different, they can become agitated with each other. Because if I'm high in this classification and you're low and you're asking me all these questions and I focus on that, I'm thinking, wow, you're really creating drag here. And if I'm at the low end and I'm talking to that person at the high end, I'm thinking, you're just running so fast that you're going to let something slip through the crack and it's going to make a big mess that I'm going to have to clean up. Thank you very much. Right? So when you focus on sort of the negative side of it, you can really have some, headbutting going on. In healthy work environments, though, what I find is that people at the opposite ends here actually appreciate each other. Because if I'm strong in this ability, I want to find that person I can go to and say, this is what I want to do, what am I forgetting? And you'll start asking me questions. And if I'm low in this, and you're strong in this, I so appreciate that I can come to you and say, I've thought of A, B, and C, and I give you a high-level overview, and you say, go with B, that's the one. I mean, you're my shortcut. All right? So when you learn to work together on this, it's really a benefit. Okay? Now, in this group, We have 63% in the low range, 17% in the high range, 20% in the mid range. All right. We put this particular ability together with the next one, the concept organization, because it's the second convergent reasoning ability. Oh, another way of coming to a conclusion. Concept organization was the work sample where you had the words at the top of the page, and then you drop them into boxes based on their relationship to each other. How many of you loved this? Yeah, me too. Yeah. How many of you didn't? Yeah.
Did it first.
Yeah. And some of you liked it to begin with, and then it kind of went and petered out from there.
Yeah.
All right, got it. All right. Concept organization is the brain's way of ordering things. It's linear, logical problem solving. It's getting from point A to point Z and knowing, your brain knows what each of the steps are in between. So in terms of solving a problem, this is a little bit slower way of getting to a conclusion because you're going to go through each of the steps. But it's more thorough. Okay? And we're going to look at the two together and see how they work together as well. But concept organization by itself, when you're strong in concept organization, to be perfectly honest, there's a way to do everything. And the way is a process, and the process has steps. And you start at the first step, and you work your way through each of the steps to the end. And there's your conclusion. All right? To people who are lower in concept organization, sometimes you scratch your head and say, you know, everything doesn't need a process here, okay? However, yeah, there's a lot of finger pointing going on in this room right now. All right, but the other thing is that sometimes people with high concept organization can be perceived, in leadership, they can be perceived as, well, how did they know that was going to happen? Like, because in their mind, it just makes sense that it goes through this order and that's what's going to happen, and they're telling you that's what's going to happen, and there it does. All right. For people that are high in concept organization, and I'm saying this because I'm making fun of myself at the same time, but you should not tell jokes. Okay? Because you will tell the history of the joke, where you heard the joke, you will go through the entire thing, and then everybody's like out of it by the time you give the punchline, okay? All right. Now, at the opposite end of the continuum, the people that are low in concept organization, what your gift is decisiveness. You can look at something and say, yes, I like it, no, I don't. Yes, I should, no, I shouldn't. This will work, this won't work. Okay? It's decisive. However, it's not as easy for you to also put together an explanation, because an explanation needs a logic track. And that is not automatic to you. So if you are at the low end of the continuum, you can be very decisive, but I'm telling you, in leadership, you know this. There are times where you're going to have to communicate to other people how you came to that conclusion. You will find that sometimes maybe your ideas don't get adopted because you can't give the logic track. So what you are also hearing is that concept organization is related to communication. Because the higher the concept organization, the more likely you are to lay out a logic track that other people can follow, and you can hear when they're getting off track and help them get back on. Okay? We do have some people in the mid-range. And so the people in the mid-range, hey, they have an appreciation for process. A good process works, that's great. But you know what? If a step isn't necessary, we can skip it. You know, like we're not locked in. All right. Generally, you can create a logic track that people can follow. If it gets into all the little gory details, that takes more effort on your part. Okay. In this group, we have 75% that are decisive. We have 13% that are in the high range, 12% in the mid-range. So the thing about this, what this would suggest to me is it's not that you can't be organized. You know, concept organization is about what's going on in your head. Interestingly, if you're high in concept organization, outwardly you might look a little bit messy because you're carrying around the organization in your head. If you're low in concept organization, which means you're not carrying around all that organization mentally, outwardly you might keep things fairly well organized because you need that external organizing structure to do it. I'm not saying that's the only reason why people are organized outwardly, but I've seen that with regularity. Okay? Now, what this would say is that most people in this room would appreciate somebody creating a process to follow. It's not that you don't like process, it's that your mind doesn't create it for you all the time on its own. So being provided a process to follow is probably helpful. What do y'all think about that? Yeah? And when there isn't a process in place, you will probably take the time to create it. It's not automatic. It will take you some time, effort, and energy, but you'll see the value in it because then there's something that you don't have to think about again. The process is there. All right, when you put these two things together, again, in your reports, there's a page around 16 or so that gives the overall picture of this disc here, and then the following page has your results. So like the personal style piece, you have people that are strong in both, and those are described as consultative problem solvers. They can see solutions quickly, and they can explain the answer easily. The logic track. Opposite them are the pragmatic problem solvers. Your pragmatic problem solvers are the ones, well, let me save them for last. Let's go to the diagnostic problem solver. The diagnostic problem solver is the one that has high classification, but low concept organization. So they're the ones that see solutions quickly, can't always explain. They see it, don't have the logic track. The analytical people are the opposite. They're low in that classification, high in concept organization. They're very process-oriented, step by step by step. Okay? But then we have the people that are pragmatic, that are low. These are people that solve problems based on their own direct experience. We call them experiential problem solvers or pragmatic problem solvers. The way pragmatic problem solvers solve is by the first thing they think of is this situation that I'm facing right now, what is it like? What else have I done that is like this that tells me what to do right here? So let me tell you a little bit about pragmatic problem solvers. The thing is, when they take on a new job or new role or new responsibility, if it's not something they have any experience with, they kind of want to step back for a minute. They want to say, wait a minute, I don't have enough experience to be the decision maker on this yet. I don't have the experience yet, because you're using your own experience. So you feel reticent to jump into that new responsibility. And if you're going to be forced to do that responsibility anyway, then what you immediately look for is the person with that experience. You don't want to talk, you don't want to look it up and talk to a consultant, you don't want to read about it. No. You want to go to the person that did it. Okay? That's what pragmatic problem solvers do. So while they may be, let's just call it slower to jump in at the beginning with things that they are unfamiliar with, once they get up on that experience curve, they can become the fastest problem solvers. And the reason is because They're not using a diagnostic model to compare this. They're not using a linear, logical way to arrive at a conclusion. They simply say, this is like that, so we do this. Period. Don't need a rationale behind it. Okay? So, what I think, what you can reflect on a little bit is, you know, when you went into this position as assistant principal, there were new responsibilities. And if you're a pragmatic problem solver, I mean, there was probably an internal feeling of, they believe in me, they think I can do this, and I've never done it before. Whereas the consultative problem solver, the one that's diagonal from you, they kind of jump in with both feet, they just go for it. The people that are analytical, analyze it. The diagnosticians see the pattern. So everybody solves problems, but they're gonna look different in the process. So what I think is so wonderful is that y'all are in a program that's going to be giving you all these experiences. So what I'd like to do is, if y'all could help me, somebody turn that chart around. Can you turn that chart around? Can you turn that chart around? And I'm gonna get you all to go. Just take the tape and put it on the other side. All right, go to your corners. Uh-oh.
We're halfway.
Look, no analytical problem solvers. Not a one.
Me, alone?
Alone.
Okay.
No consultative problem solvers. Alone. Now what we have are these two. They can move that way. And then we have these two. They can move that way if they need to. All right, but there's not anybody there just completely on there. We have a huge number of pragmatic problem solvers. We have a couple of diagnosticians. And look what we have in the middle. So what's interesting again about the person in the mid-range, in the middle, that sort of flexible problem solver, is guess what? When she's working with the pragmatic, guess where how she operates? Consultative.
Yes, you do.
If she's working with diagnostic, she moves to analytical. So there are ways of, as a team, filling in the gap. But what I would say is, as a group, you don't have anybody that's automatically process-oriented by itself. So that's something everybody should pay attention to. We just have to make sure that we're including that in our thought process.
It's there. It's there.
Okay. And you may be the strongest one for it, right?
I don't know about that, but it's there.
All right.
When I make a decision, I'm calling Sherry.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So, is this what you all would have expected?
For sure, yes.
Now the thing about Sherry, is it?
Yes.
You know, Sherry's looking at everybody else in this room and thinking, well, I can flex, why can't you? That's kind of the people in the middle who just, their brains automatically do that for them. Everybody else can do that, but you'll have to be intentional about it. That's what this is saying. Yeah.
Share pragmatic again, what that means, since we're so heavy in that area.
Pragmatic is basically experience-based. So these are people who use their own previous experience to solve in the here and now. Now, the thing to watch out for as pragmatic problem solvers is that you have to understand that much of your experience is unique to you. Not every single person in that group has had the same set of experiences. So what happens is you accumulate these experiences. You can come across to other people as a sort of out-of-the-box thinker because you're taking a solution from something that may be totally out of even education and applying it to this situation. And everybody's like, how did you think to do that? And for you, it's the same thing. The dynamic is the same, the situation, there are elements of the situation that are the same, and so you'll solve it that way. It doesn't mean that you all will understand each other though, because your experiences are different. So the most important thing about pragmatic problem solvers is, number one, to make sure that you get experiences so that you have a lot in your kind of toolkit to pull from. Okay. And also to make sure that you give yourself the time and you have a discussion about the time you need to get up on the curve on things. Doesn't mean you can that you aren't going to have responsibilities that you're not going to have to jump into, because you will. But explaining that to people can go a long way into helping them understand why you're maybe not jumping right into it. Okay, and then for the people that are in the middle like this, you can flex in these ways, either way. So you might get pulled on to go over here and to go over here. But you'd like to work with somebody that's a little bit more complementary, somebody that's not just like you in your leadership teams. Okay, thank you. All right, the third driving ability is this thing called idea productivity. Idea productivity was the one where you wrote a story about if you woke up and everybody was 15 feet tall, what changes would there be? And just so you know, there was another work sample where they measured your typing speed. They didn't even look at it. They calibrated the score using your typing speed. So if you were a super slow typist, they took that into account in coming up with your score. So idea productivity is a measure of the sheer quantity of ideas your mind generates. It doesn't really address the quality of those ideas or the originality. So people that are in the high range on idea productivity have a little idea generator in their head, where one idea triggers another, triggers another, triggers another. It's very, almost impossible to turn it off. And what's challenging then is managing that idea flow. So usually people with high idea productivity find ways to capture their ideas, offload them somehow, because what your brain will try to do is remember all the ideas as even they continue to be generated. And then it gets pretty clogged. Now, you can imagine that there might be differences in whether or not you see somebody's idea productivity based on their introversion, extroversion scores. So if you have high idea productivity and you're an extrovert, what do you think that looks like? Everybody's hearing all your ideas. Okay? If you're an introvert and you are high in idea productivity, what do you think that looks like?
You just do it.
Right? It's kind of, there's a lot of noise in your head, all right? There's a lot going on in there. It's just going and going. All right? Yeah. Yeah, it may or may not include voices, yeah. All right. If you're in the low range, and now remember I said that doesn't mean that all your ideas are good. Most people with high idea productivity know that not all their ideas are good. But you will want to be in an environment that wants ideas. Like it will feel suffocating if you're in an environment that does not want ideas. Now, one of the challenges in leadership is if you have high idea productivity, you have to find some way to manage it, because the reality is, if you're throwing all those ideas out there and people are paying attention to all the ideas that you're throwing out there, they think that you're telling them to do all those things, and you've just diluted all their energy, all their efforts, and you overwhelm people. So what you have to do is find a different way of managing those ideas so that you don't get people scattered in a million different directions and nobody gets anything done. How many big projects can a leader really take on in a school year? How many? Big. One. It can have a lot of parts. Of course, it gets broken down into a lot of parts. Sometimes you can have two, but you get beyond that, and you're just not going to get the work done. So what you have to learn to do if you have that high idea productivity is have your own private parking lot list. What are the things? What are we going to prioritize? And keep coming back to that main priority. Okay? Now, if you're low in idea productivity, this is not saying you don't have any ideas. If you're low in idea productivity, what it says is that you can work on a project or on a goal or an objective and not become distracted by a lot of other competing demands. You might be the person that's in a meeting that acts almost like a filter to all the ideas that are being brainstormed. What you can hold in focus is what the purpose or the intention of the meeting is, or what the goal is, and you listen and you say, wait a minute, we're off track, we need to get this done, or those ideas are good, but here's the one that's really going to work. So many times people with low idea productivity act as sort of a filter and a focal point. Also, many times people with low idea productivity secretly sometimes feel like brainstorming is a waste of time. Because it's like, we've already talked about the good idea, why are we still talking about a million others? Secretly, it just kind of go like that real quick if you've ever had that idea, that thought. Oh yeah. Okay. So, people in the mid-range have the rheostat. They are able to turn it up when they need to. If they're talking to an individual or a group that's stuck, they can start generating ideas to help get the juices flowing. If they're talking to an individual or a group that is scattered all over the place, they can bring focus to them. So they kind of have that ideal rheostat there. In this group, look at what we have. Way more than half that are in the high range. And then another 33% that are in the mid-range. So as a group, from where I stand, because you are also more introverts, it's not like everybody's hearing all the ideas, but there would be my, not concern, but what I would be looking out for is, are we able to bring focus to this? Are we able to bring, without people mentally going in 25 different directions? And as a leader, that would be the question to keep asking. Are we keeping the focus? Are we keeping the focus? And there are lots of ways of doing that. But you'd have to be intentional about that. This group would have to be intentional about that. Does that make sense to you? How many of you know that you have to work at that? Kind of know? Never thought about it? Having too many ideas about it right now? Okay. We get to the 2 spatial reasoning abilities. Okay, we look at these individually and together. Spatial relations theory is a favorite of many. It's the paper folding hole punch. Okay? Spatial relations theory, the definition of it is when you're in the high range, it's being able to understand the theoretical underpinnings of the mechanical universe. It's your brain thinks of things in terms of systems. And it sees the interrelationships, and it can think hypothetically and theoretically. Your brain works in a way that, when you're in the high range, your brain works in a way that says, oh, well, if I change this, if I add this, what happens to the interactions between all the other parts? If I take this away, what happens to the interaction of all the other parts? And it can be of an actual hands-on mechanical system or building, but systems can also be interpersonal systems. All right? When you are in the low range on this, what it says is that what you prefer is not thinking about things hypothetically and theoretically, you like to have direct contact with whatever the subject matter is. So if the subject matter is a machine, you want to put your hands on, you want connection with the machine. If it's working with people, you want to be up close with the people. Not studying it, being with it. So for example, how many of you had to take somewhere in your coursework, like theories of learning? Do they have to take theories of, okay. So for people who take that course that are low in spatial relations theory, it's nice to know that. Isn't it interesting that somebody figured these theories out? And what's going through your mind is, yeah, but how do I make this kid learn? There's that kid right there that I'm trying to figure out. You want to be closer to the subject matter. The downside can be, though, that you're so focused on that thing that it's harder to see how it relates to everything else. So let me tell you what that could mean in leadership. Most school systems, and I don't believe that Houston County is any different than anybody else, most school systems, there's a political environment. There's a political environment within schools. There's a political environment within the school system. There's a political environment between the school system and the community. There's a political environment between the school system and the board, right? There are all these interpersonal systems, right? And you all are aware of that. It doesn't mean that you love being involved in it. In fact, people low on theory, when I work with aspiring superintendents even, they're like, oh gosh, I wish we didn't have to worry about the politics, like that's a bad thing. And honestly, politics aren't by nature bad. They can be bad, but they're not automatically bad, but it's understanding them. So if you are low in the spatial relations theory, what this is telling you is that you would have to be intentional about paying attention to those things. Find people who understand them that can help you understand them. It's not going to be automatic. So knowing that they're there, it's very important to pay attention. Does that make sense to you? I feel like you're looking at me and not quite, does it?
Again, like I say, going back to my brain, it goes back to different subjects. So when I look at that aspect of, like you said, politics and understanding different politics, I go back to my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So I think about the politics that I need, the different experience to get there. But once I got the experience with dealing with that, I am fine.
Yes. And so you have to be intentional about picking it up. Because also, let's just say everybody was dropped into a different school system across Georgia. And every system's different. And all the politics are different. So because it doesn't come naturally, you'd want to come up with, okay, what's my way of learning this set of politics? It's just knowing that in the back of your mind. They're there, and I need to pay attention, and I need to learn it. All right, in this group, 58% in the low range, 25% in the mid-range, 17% in the high range. All right. We blend this with the next spatial reasoning ability, the spatial relations visualization, which was the one with the cubes, where you were given one set and 3 at the bottom. Oh, come on. All right. Spatial relations visualization is the ability to see in 3 dimensions when only given 2. And what it relates to is this. The people that are at the high end of the continuum on this relate most easily to the concrete, tangible world. It doesn't mean that you have to be working with your hands, but even concrete facts, concrete data, okay? Things don't feel real if they're completely theoretical. They're completely intangible, okay? The people at the low end of the continuum operate very easily in the intangible world. So the intangible world is the world of relationships, ideas, emotions. So all the intangible, even the world of words. So just to give you a point of reference, it's not unusual to find engineers scoring at which end? At the high end. Engineers, more hands-on. Where do you think lawyers score? At the low end. They work in the world of words. Okay? And there are other occupations, but usually when I give those two examples, it kind of makes sense to people. And you can have people in the mid-range, and these are people, so let me give you something that's very important to understand about disability. Spatial relations visualization can influence the work roles and responsibilities or the type of occupation that you move into. Generally, the majority of positions within education, do you think they fall at the high end or low end? Mostly at the low end. Not all of the roles within education, but many of them, education's kind of a relationship business, okay? Education for the past 15 years or so has been working very hard to become more concrete. Education has developed rubrics. You've developed data mining. You've developed concrete examples of things. All right, so you work very hard to add a level of concreteness to education, which is needed. Okay? But what I have found is this. In leadership, when people are low on this spatial relations visualization, they have to work harder in communicating in a concrete, tangible way. They have to work harder at coming up with concrete examples. They have to work harder at making things, making things feel more real to people who are more structural than they are. All right? And if somebody is more structural, they have to work more in their communication to include information that is more intangible, that relates to the feelings, that relates to the ideas and the relationships. Because when you're communicating as a leader with a group of people, you're going to have people that are up and down this continuum, and you want to relate to all of them. So if I'm trying to sell a new curriculum to a board of education, and I come in and I show them the books, and I show them the software, and I show them the data, I'm going to have somebody on that board that's going to say, that's nice, but are the kids having fun? And if I come in and say, the kids love it, they're engaged, the teachers enjoy administering, the parents are talking about it. And I'm sitting there and saying, that's nice, show me the data and show me the book, or show me the software. So as a leader, you need to be prepared for all types of communication. That, I think, is a very important element of this particular dimension. Okay, in this group, we had 2/3 in the low range, 13% in the high range, and 20% in the mid range. So you can come up with another disc like this, and rather than go around to the corners of the room, let's just do this. If you are low spatial relations theory, low spatial relations visualization, stand up. These are the people that are very comfortable executing things, don't always need to know the theory behind it. They know in leadership, you know that there will be times that you're going to have to explain the why behind things, so you'll learn it. But it's not always necessary for you to take action. Like for you, just tell me what you want done, I'll do it. Okay? That's the executing stuff. Okay, you can sit down. How about the high theory, low visualization? You have anybody there? High theory, low visualization. Yeah? Okay. So this is a person that can see how things works. This is a person that can think about the system. They can see the interrelated pieces. I mean, depending on the time frame can play into this, concept organization can play into this. However, what she will need help with is the hands-on part of it. I can have the ideas, I can think about all of this, but to operationalize it, to make the book, I need help. To make the program, I can think of the program and the design of the program, but to actually produce the material for the program, you know, like, I would love help with that. Okay? Anybody purple? High visualization but low theory. High visualization, low theory. Okay, so this is the person that can build it. This is your bud here. This is your bud. Because he may not be thinking about how all the pieces are working together. All right, tell me what you want built and I'll do it. Okay, I can create it. I can put it together. All right, so that's the builder. Do we have anybody that's orange? Engineering, high. Okay, so this is the person that knows how to build it and knows why it needs to be built the way it is. But in all honesty, work is going to not have the same enjoyment level until you can be able to point to something and say, I made that, I did that, I built that.
Sit down. You keep to yourself.
Okay. I know we have people that are in between. Do we have anybody that's right smack in the middle?
We better.
All right. So he can shift into just like it works just like I always thought if I could design my own profile, I'd love to be in the middle on all those drivers because it would give me the most flexibility, you know. But so he has the flexibility of going into any of those roles as needed. So he's sort of your pinch hitter there, and can switch it up based on who he's with. So I know some of you are in between a couple of these, but you get the same, it works the same way as those others. Overall, I would say that how many of you know that you work pretty hard at making, like at the data stuff and at the rubrics and at, like, you know the importance of it and you know that you need to work hard and have it. Almost everybody does, right? And so it's not something that's going away and it's something that is needed. And so the more you practice it, the more it starts becoming a skill set that you use continuously. The time that it would fade is if you stopped using it. So if you stopped using it, it would decline. So you want to stay up with that. You want to keep using that and staying connected to that. Okay. Any questions on the drivers? So one thing I can tell you about those driving abilities is that when you look at your own profile, whatever the extremes are, whether they're at the high or the low end, that's the direction you're being pulled in. If you're in the middle on any of them, you have that flexibility. But what you want to do is look at your roles and responsibilities in your position and say, how can I use my talent right here in the work that I do? And how can I leverage the talent of somebody else who's opposite of me? And that will continue. I also just want to remind you that, and I can't overemphasize this enough, when you're in leadership, people want to know how to work with you. They want to know how to work with you. So the more you can use this in a just normal language, like telling people about yourself, like, I need a couple minutes to recharge. Or you know, I see that, I know what we need to do. I need a minute to put together my thoughts so that I can explain it in a way that can be followed. Or, you know, I have a lot of ideas and I need to hold back so that I can prioritize them and give you a good one, you know. So by helping people understand you, they then understand how to work with you, and it's a time saver because people aren't having to undo their thoughts about you. You know, because they're making stories up about you. If they don't know you, they're making stories up about you. So you might as well give them the right story to begin with so that they can work more easily with you. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's go to the specialized abilities. And these I'm just going to go over in groups. Oh, so let me give you 5 minutes. Talk to your partner about anything that you have to take away about your driving abilities. What stood out to you? What's a strength? What's challenging out of any of those 5? We're going to move into, does anybody want to share anything that came out of this right now? I mean, you're going to share at the end, I know, but, okay, let's talk about the specialized abilities. And I talk about these in combination. So maybe the best thing to do is to go to your bar chart, look at your bar chart, because I'll look at different combinations together with you on this. All right. So what specialized abilities do is they enhance or help. They support the driving abilities. There's one extra driver that's embedded in these specialized abilities, and it's the musical combination. So if you happen to be in the middle there, if you happen to be in the high range on tonal memory, rhythm memory, and pitch discrimination, that says that you have a natural musical ability. Now, if you're strong in that and you've never picked up an instrument and you've never developed the skill to play a particular instrument, it doesn't mean that you're going to play an instrument, but it's still, music is going to be an important element of your life and you need a connection to it. You need some outlet for it. So whether it's incorporating it on the job, off the job, in your leisure time, with your kids, any way you can kind of incorporate, that's going to be really important. For those of you that are in the not all high or all low on those 3, on tonal, rhythm, and pitch, what your reports will describe it as is having some musical ability. Okay? And I will tell you, you can become highly skilled at playing an instrument. You can be a wonderful performer. It just takes more practice when it's not a natural ability. All right, there's another combination. It's the first 2 that you look at under the specialized abilities, the design memory and the observation. So design memory was the one with the dots and the lines, and then you're just given the dots, and you have to connect the lines back. And observation is the one where you looked at an array of items, and then on the second screen you had to say what was new, removed, or changed. Okay, those 2 combine to create a 2-dimensional visual combination of abilities. All right, design memory is the ability to recall the overall layout or pattern, and observation is the ability to see the detail and to notice the detail. So if you're strong in both of those, that's going to say, honestly, how things look is important to you. How things look is important to you. All right? If you're strong on the design, but low in the observation, you might be able to remember the overall layout of a building. Say, oh, it has a hub with spokes, you know. Oh, the Atlanta airport is, you know, Central Hall and that sort of thing. Like, you will remember, but not so much the detail. Not what stores are on each terminal, you know, and that sort of thing. All right, if you're strong in observation, oh, and one other thing. If you're high in design memory, the placement of things is important to you. So, for example, you might be the person that has everything out on their desk. you know, this is this pile, this is that pile. Like for you, out, like you know it makes sense to you. Okay? Now, if you're high in observation and low in design, what it says is that you can see small differences in details. You could apply it to, say, janitorial services, right? There's a dust bunny in the corner. You could apply it to a room. Oh, that shirt is crooked. You could apply it to, oh, I noticed the fabrics on the chair, but not the layout of the room. You know, so, but you could also apply it to people, especially if you're more extroverted. So you might notice facial expressions, body language, all that sort of thing. If you're low in observation, having some kind of checklist is a good thing for you. So for example, you might go in and do teacher observations, and you walk out and you say, oh, that looked pretty good to me. You know, and then the person you're with says, do you notice that the teacher's teaching on the planetary systems, the solar system, and that the oceans are on the bulletin board? You know, like that kind of thing. Oh, now that you mention it. So having a checklist, it doesn't mean you can't see it, but it's not automatic that you notice those details. All right, another combination is visual proficiency. And that refers to the two lines on your bar chart that say visual speed and visual accuracy. Those were that was the very first work sample you did. There were number letter combinations, almost like license plates in 2 columns, and you were checking across to see if they were the same or different. This is specific to paperwork, whether it's on the computer or a hard copy. It's being able to process symbols. So, for some people, the visual speed is very high and the visual accuracy is very low. What do you think that means? Yes, you like to get it off your desk, but it's not necessarily correct. Okay, you can have people that have the reverse, right? The speed is very low and the accuracy is very high. That's saying by nature, they're kind of perfectionist about making sure everything is absolutely right, even though it's going to take them a long time. Okay. You can have people in the middle, you can have people high, you can have people high-low, but here's what you need to know, is you need to think about the amount of paperwork you have. And then how does your score relate to that? And if your accuracy is low and your speed is high, usually slowing down will increase in accuracy. If you're low in both, it's going to be a challenge. And it's really helpful if you have other people to help you with this. And find other ways to check it, like reading your emails out loud, you know, things like that. Okay?
Yes.
All right. We also have something about language learning. So with languages, learning another language, there are two primary ways that we can approach learning another language. One is from the book, so the vocabulary and the grammar. And what would facilitate that is high verbal memory. Verbal memory was the one with the nonsense word, English word pairs. And then you're just given the nonsense word. This is your ability to recall what you read. So in terms of learning another language, the stronger the verbal memory, the easier it is for you to learn the vocabulary and the grammar from the book. If your tonal memory is very high, the best way for you to start is conversationally. Just jump in. Don't worry about the conjugation of the verbs and learning how to spell the vocabulary and all that. You want to come back and supplement with that, but jumping in conversationally is a good way for you to start. If you're strong in both verbal and tonal, it says that's learning another language. You could do that. Now, what would supplement it is rhythm memory and pitch discrimination. Rhythm memory, which was the one where you listen to a series of beeps, like Morse code almost, and then the second time you had to say, is it the same or different? That is being able to keep the cadence. So in Romance languages, for example, Spanish and Italian, there's a cadence to it. having high rhythm memory would help with the language, replicating the sound of the language. Pitch was the one, is the second note higher or lower?
That was unfair. It sounded the same.
Well, we have a group of people over here who said it's unfair, they were all the same. Yeah, it was very close. So pitch discrimination is the ability to make this fine auditory discrimination. So pitch is to the ears, as observation is to the eyes. All right, and this can help in like Asian languages where it's completely dependent on the intonation. I also have people that can replicate the sound of language but have no idea what they're saying. Right? So they can make it sound right, and they have high pitch, but they don't have any tone memory. They don't know what they're saying. All right, the last group up here is the creative orientation. We do not have a direct measure of creativity or artistic ability on here. However, we can say that if you look at idea productivity, which would be ideas, design memory, which would be visual, and pitch discrimination, which would be auditory, if the higher all three of those are, the greater the kind of creative orientation. It's not guaranteeing that you're going to be artistic. And if one of those is higher than the other, that's where the creativity will come out. Okay, to me, the next group of abilities that we put together is probably the most important for you all as leaders to pay attention to. And they are the 5 specialized abilities that have the word memory after it. So if you go down your chart, it starts with design memory, then verbal, then tonal, then rhythm, then number. You also have a page in your report, I believe it's somewhere around page 33, that rank orders these 5 recall channels. Now, I know that there's more to learning than recalling information, okay? But recalling information is an important part of the learning process, and this tells you the type of information that's easiest for you to recall. So, if your strongest learning channel was design memory, that says, again, that was the dots and the lines. What that says is it's very easy for you to recall things that are in pictures, graphs, and charts. Information that's displayed in pictures, graphs, and charts. Even an outline on a page creates a visual pattern, and that can help you recall the information. A flow chart. Anything like that, okay? The verbal memory, which was the English word, nonsense word, pairs, is recalling information that you read. Now, it's not guaranteeing the comprehension piece. I understand that. But in terms of recalling what you read, for most people, the higher the verbal memory, the more they want to get their hands on books and articles and things to read to learn something new. That's very helpful to them. And if that's one of your strongest learning channels, that's what you want to be asking for. What is there for me to read about this? Tonal memory, which was listening to a sequence of notes and then which in the sequence changed, not only relates to music, but it relates to learning. So if this is your strongest learning channel, this is remembering what you hear. So listening to podcasts, listening to lectures, talking things through with some, those are all ways of getting in the information through your ears. Now, I will tell you, one of the things that always comes up for leaders is if they are low on tonal memory, they pretty quickly learn that they need to tell people to email them things or text them things. Because literally, it is in one ear and out the other. And it's not personal. It's not personal, but this would be an example of really it's helpful to tell people why you're asking them. Instead of just saying, oh, just email me, just text me. Taking the extra few seconds to say, what you're saying is important to me, and my ears just don't remember it. I need to see it. That goes a long way for them understanding that. Okay? We also have rhythm memory, which is the pattern of notes, or pattern of beats, the same or different. And in terms of a learning channel, this relates to kinesthetic learning. It's large muscle movement going through the motions. And honestly, in most of your jobs, fewer of your responsibilities are related to this. I mean, it's obviously very helpful in athletics and dance and that sort of thing. But what I can say is this: the higher your rhythm memory, the greater your need to move for your brain to work. So if you're in the mid to high range, sitting still behind your desk all day, your brain comes to a halt. If you're in the high range, you need the equivalent of 1 hour of physical activity 5 days a week. And I don't mean you have to go to the gym. Most of you as assistant principals are moving around, right? I mean, you're walking around your buildings. But if you know that you have this high rhythm memory, you need to do that. That you need to be intentional about it. If you're in the mid-range, it'll say you need the equivalent of 1 hour 3 days a week. If you're in the low range, it does not mean you can be a couch potato. What we find is that almost everybody needs physical activity, but it's for a different reason. So for the people that are high in rhythm memory, like I explained, they need that movement so that their brain works. Like, I've had people say, I need to go for a jog at the end of every day, because when I jog, everything comes to conclusion. Everything jogs itself into place. Like, it was getting mushy in there, and it all comes to me. And when people are low in rhythm memory, they'll say, I have to jog every day, because that's the only way I can make myself stop thinking. It does something different for them. It stops it. They have to think so much about putting one foot in front of the other that the rest of the ideas are irrelevant. All right, so not off the hook if you're low rhythm memory. The last learning channel here, or recall channel here, is number memory. And number memory is the one where you have the page of numbers, and then you just have to spit them out on the next screen. This is non-associative learning. This is like rote memorization. This is being able to recall sequences of numbers. And typically it's driven by your interests. So if you're interested in sports, hey, sports statistic, jersey numbers, those sorts of things stick. If you're interested in finances, money things stick. If you're not interested in history, dates may not stick so much. You know? So actually number memory is, the higher the number memory, the more you process information numerically. So it's not a calculating ability. It's processing numerically. So for example, remembering that there were 22 people in the room, but not remembering their names. Remembering the grocery list that you left in your car had 10 items on it, and you have 5 items in your buggy, so you're missing 5. All right, so you're processing numerically. So you can put that to good use if you add numbers to things. Add numbers to your to-do list, and so forth. So the big thing I think that is important for leaders to know is this. It's extremely important for you to be able to communicate to other people how you're going to recall information. So the number one important thing to remember is, what do you need to acquire new information? But the other thing, which everybody in this room knows, is that the more ways you can communicate with other people, the more people you will access. So even though I may have one high learning channel, and it might be number memory, I'm not so inclined to show you charts, and I'm not so inclined to give you something to read, but if I'm in leadership, I better be doing that. And I may not be the one to provide the information on all those channels, but I can sure make sure that it happens by using other people around me. So we tend to try and communicate to other people on our strongest learning channel. Just don't forget the other channels to reach other people. This is what this group looked like. We had a whole lot of people that that remember numbers and words. The tonal, I'm a little worried about at least a third of you getting anything out of this workshop today. Just kidding. That's why I gave you charts. All right. But anyway, I mean, this is pretty interesting, I think. And you can imagine working with your own leadership team, understanding this could be very helpful. Okay. What I want to talk about real quick is vocabulary, because vocabulary is the last line on your bar chart, and it represents a skill. So you're not born with your vocabulary, you develop it. And two things to know. Number one, it's a skill. And number two, remember, this is a reference score. So this is your score relative to the people in our database. And our database has a higher level of education than the general population. So this is not your score relative to the general whole world population. Okay? It would likely show up higher if you were being compared to the general population. But what I can say is this. Anything that anybody can do to increase their vocabulary only helps them. It helps you express the abilities that you have. Okay? Now, for many of you, there is less of an opportunity to acquire new words or practice $10 words on the job. You're trying to remain relatable to the students in your building, their parents, and they do not relate to the $10 words. So this is something that you would probably have to work at and develop and practice off the job. That's where it's going to happen. I will share with you that in 20 years in working with educational administrators and aspiring superintendents, that the average vocabulary score of all of those administrators is well below the 50th percentile. Just so you know. So, we tend to feel most comfortable communicating with people at a similar vocabulary level to ourselves and them with us. And that's why I think it's very difficult in K-12 to practice that high-level vocabulary on the job. So in this group, what we had were 17% in the high range, 29% in the low range, and 54% in the mid-range. All right. Before we go into our final activity, do you have any questions for me? Throw them out there.
Is there other material to read to learn more about this other than what's in the booklet?
Okay. So you can go to, so in terms of each of the individual abilities, there's not, except that you can go to the Highlands website. It's highlandsco.com, and you can read up about everything about them. Highlands publishes a book about the whole person and all the other factors. It's called Don't Waste Your Talent. And again, it's not related just to abilities, but it's to all the parts. And we have a lot of leaders that really appreciate the book, that you can get it from Highlands, you can get it from Amazon, used, I'm sure. Don't Waste Your Talent is the test publisher's book. So my first question for you is this. If I had asked you to write down every skill that you have, would you have come up with this list? Okay. The second thing is, when you look at all the things that you highlighted, are there things on there that you have a skill in, but you'd really rather not use? Yes. Okay. There's a possibility that those represent things that don't have a foundation in your natural abilities. Maybe. Not always, but maybe. And so as a leader, this is where you start thinking about, yes, I can do this, but is that the best use of my time, effort, and energy? and you start thinking about, you know what, there's some things that nobody else can do and I have to do. There's just not any way around it. And so here are the givens and this is what I have to do. But you know, there are other things that I don't enjoy doing, and in my mind's imagination, because I don't enjoy doing it, I pretty much figure nobody else enjoys doing it. So I would never ask anybody else to do this, and you need to be asking, because it's not the best use of your time, effort, and energy. So I just want you to keep, we've spent so much time thinking about abilities, but I don't want to lose sight of all the skills that you've also developed. So that's just a kind of a thought process for you. The last thing that we're going to do here is you can use this as a script. You can write on it to prepare for it, or you can freewheel it. Okay? But each person's going to stand up and answer these questions. All right? The recap activity that's in your folder has a few questions. It says, what are 3 things your colleagues and staff should know about you? And think about things that you could tell them from this assessment that you've taken, the Highlands Ability Battery. Identify one thing that you'd like to focus on improving. You'd like to, it could be, it could have an abilities base, but it could also be a process thing. Like, I need to be looking for somebody that compliments me this way. It can be anything. All right? And then be specific on how you're going to do that, how you're going to hold yourself accountable, and how you'll know that you achieved that. So I will give you 3 minutes to jot some notes down, and then the first brave person that wants to more or less freewheel it can hop on up and share. But everybody's going to have the chance. And I'll start in 3 minutes. Okay. I know. So here's the thing. A lot of times when you're in these leadership positions, this is how much time you have. You have to be able to wing it a little bit. So just sit back and think about what you learned. Who would like to go first? Richard. There he goes.
3 things I'd like you to know about me. I'm 95% introverted, so I'll be tired after this is all over. 95% time frame, which aligns with my strength finders of futuristic. And I have no tonal memory, so please send me an email or text. And my commitment is to enhance vocabulary. And my accountability partner would be Chris Brown, because Cheryl's vocabulary is true.
Thank you. Who will go next? All right, hop on up.
All right, 3 things. I'm a generalist, introvert, pragmatic thinker. One thing, the third thing is something that surprised me, that I have really high tonal memory, but I have to operate off email. I'm one of those people that still says send it to me by email. One thing I commit to focusing on is reaching others on their learning channel to communicate better. One thing I thought about was basically stealing things. Things that other people are stealing other people's resources, things they do very well. I would have 2% of those things with the hopes of, or that kind of leads me into my next thing. Sherry Johnson will be my accountable person, but I'll know I can achieve this when I'm explaining something to a group, and at some point I have everybody's undivided attention at some point. It's not going to have everybody all the time.
Correct. Great. Thank you.
3 things. Again, my favorite saying is, I believe the words about people, and that's where I get my energy from. And so therefore, again, I have my productivity is my experiences. I used to think about experiences basically were a downfall, but they are actually a benefit because again, everything I've been through. But as far as I like to call on people, so when I call on you, it's not because I am trying to get better. I need to hear something just to bounce my ideas off of. I do think out loud. And sometimes I think out loud and tell people that when I start talking, I'm not talking to get an answer from you. I'm talking to get a communication aspect, like, hey, we want to go through the process so I can understand different things. I am, again, a networker, extrovert networker, and detailed communicator. But in that sense, again, I need to take the time out to speak in like to my people that are they're not forward thinkers or whatever. Just go step by step process, and I need to work on that step by step process. And we work on my vocabulary, it'll get up to a considerable amount, and I need help checking. As people that know me, I will give you something to say, hey, check, constant check. I do read my emails and text out loud over several times, still ain't get that.
Okay, thank you.
Three things my colleagues and staff should know about me. I'm versatile, I naturally adapt my style, but I also don't have it may be viewed as I don't have a perspective of my own. Okay, so I need important things in writing. I also have to slow down. I'm very task oriented, so I need to slow down. One of the things I will commit to do is enhance my memory, vocabulary, even students' names from working with 2 schools. And my accountability partner will be Amanda, and I will know this when I achieve it. How will I know this? I'll be able to communicate with higher vocabulary.
All right.
3 things my colleagues need to know.
Really, I learned more. They probably already know this, but it's good for me to know it now. I'm a specialist introvert, which is interesting because I didn't know that until I read it. I definitely take my energy from being alone and reading. That's me. And sometimes in my office, I have to kind of force myself to be more social because I'd rather just work. I'm a detailed researcher, and so it says on here it's easy for them to become more knowledgeable, but we can be seen as intense or remote, which is totally me because I'm very intense, like I'm in it, but I can be the other side, and that's why it's so good that I work with other people that are so different than me. I was thinking about my principals that I've worked with. They're very different, and it's helped strengthen me in that area. And I enjoy problem solving. One thing I want to work on is being more patient because some things come naturally or some things I do quicker. I don't always have the patience for people when they don't get it or they don't understand what I'm saying. I'm like, this is so simple, but maybe it's not. And so I need to do better with that. And Dana's going to hold me accountable. And I'll know I've achieved it when I just do better. You know. And when she says to me next meeting, man, you're so patient.
All right.
All right, 3 things that my colleagues or staff should know about me is I am 90% introvert, generalist, specialist. I like to reflect on things before making decisions. I don't like making decisions just off the cuff about important things. I'm very involved in work. I spend most of my time there, even on Saturdays and Sundays sometimes, working on things. Relationships are very important to me as well. One thing I need to focus on or would like to do better at would be to focus on things in advance. I'm very today oriented. I make a list. As I get through the day, I check the list off. But I don't do things ahead of like years or months in advance. It drives my wife crazy. She's already asked me in December, what are we doing for spring break? Asked me during that week. I had that on plan that hard. Where are we going on vacation? Ask me in June. We'll see what's up then. Work on it. I know what's going to happen at work, so I like to be at work. So, of course, my wife will hold me accountable, and Dr. Dean would be the person that can help me with that problem also. So, ways I can see, I'm taking vacations, and I know where I'm going in advance before I get there.
All right.
Three things you need to know about me is I'm 95% introvert. Low vocabulary, high number memory. Rhythm memory is 80%. I guess that means I can dance. One thing I've been focused on is my vocabulary, improving my communication skills with my colleagues, and people I work with. That's always something you need to work on all the time. I'll do this by probably trying to initiate, because I am a heavy introvert, more conversations with my colleagues and teachers in my building. It just become a little more open. Again, I say I think you can always improve on that. I hold myself accountable to the boss of my house, Tom Maddox. He has no problem criticizing me. So, a very critical friend back. I'll know I have achieved my desired result when But it's quiet in my home.
Did I do a marriage counselor?
I'm not really talking.
I will be the buffer between those two.
Okay.
Yeah, I told a joke and I'm an introvert animal. So, some things to know about me is I'm an internal thinker. I'm listening and engaged, even if I don't appear to be. I enjoy numbers and working with my hands, and I'm probably not going to share the same love of music that you may, but I do enjoy special projects and problem solving. I'm going to work on vocabulary, and my partner's going to be the guy that we ride all over the county with, and surrounding counties doing out of zones. We're going to do the SAT, quiz each other on words as we're driving around all these crazy places. So that'll be the Ricky there.
All right, thank you.
All right, 3 things my colleagues should know about me is that I'm a generalist. So I need people around me that are more detail-oriented and will go deeper into the details. Another thing is just because I don't immediately respond in a situation doesn't mean I don't have an opinion. I just have to think about things. And I have a lot of ideas, but sometimes I need help with putting them in place and monitoring their progress. One thing I've been focusing on is paying closer attention to detail and communicating in a way that reflects that I'm doing that. And I'll do this by slowing down and explaining my thinking. And I'm going to hold myself accountable to Cheryl. And then I will know I have achieved my desired result when I see the effectiveness of things that I've tried to implement.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm the last one. Am I last?
No.
Okay.
No, no.
As an extrovert, I thought I'd just sit back and try and let the introverts go first. So, 3 things that I'd like my colleagues and their staff to know about me. As a strong specialist and extrovert, I'm a detailed communicator. Since I'm in communications, I was glad it validated my field. I think out loud, so let me finish what I'm saying 5-10 minutes down before I finish. Just let me think through it and talk, because I probably will change my mind. And this was an eye-opener for me, because the team I work with, I've noticed they act on things. I'm like,
No.
yeah, why are you doing that when you said you wanted it? Oh, no, I changed my mind. And now I realize that that's kind of aggravating to them. So I have to tell them, use that tip. I'm just thinking out loud, don't do anything yet. I'm a details person, but not with numbers. If you need something proofread, come see me. My visual accuracy is very high, 99%. So I'm a good reader. But I don't remember the numbers. I don't remember maps. My husband has a GPS in his head, thank the Lord, or I never get where I need to go. One thing I commit to focusing on is, I was surprised to learn I have a rhythm. I had no idea I had any rhythm whatsoever. Tanya told me, yes, we can do a dance together, but I don't know. We'll have to think about that. So I would like to experiment some of that musical potential. And I've learned, because I'm 85% kinesthetic, maybe I should do some more exercise if that really gets me going and thinking. And so I want to learn something that has to do with music or through movement such as dance. My husband will be the one who holds me accountable, and one day I would really like to learn to play the piano, so now I know
Right.
maybe I can do that.
Awesome.
All right, 3 things. Like during meetings and when I talk to people, I need to let them know that the reason that I'm quiet is because I'm processing what I have to say, because I'm a generalist introvert. I need to take time to make decisions. I have to think it through. I need to add numbers to my list to help me remember, but I still also need to email, because if people will tell me things to do, I'll forget between here and the front office. Things I need to focus on, I want to communicate with more detail and explain things in different ways so all the faculty can understand what they're supposed to be doing. I'll do this by the end of the year, and the reason I said that is because spring has hit and we're going to be explaining a lot of things to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways to get things done. And how I know I've achieved the desired result is because I will see that they've done what I've asked them to do and they've understood what I wanted.
Terrific.
Oh, and Jay's going to hold me accountable.
Okay.
3 things my colleagues and staff need to know about me. I'm a doer more than a thinker in most cases, sometimes to my own demise. I jump in before I think enough and then I have to do things again. I'd rather know a little about a lot rather than vice versa, and know a lot about a very little. And According to my design memory and observation scores, I have obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes.
One thing I commit to focusing on for the next 3 to 6 months is delegating. I'll do this by allowing others to do the simple things that don't necessarily require my priority. And I originally said I'd hold myself accountable to my wife, because she's been asking me when we're going to talk about this thing, and so I can bring it home and she can know who I am. But realistically, it'll be Melanie, because she'll hold me accountable by saying, you don't have to put your time in that, give that to somebody else.
Terrific. Still a few folks.
Okay. I am a specialist in extrovert, which is the complete opposite of the people I work with, so that's great. So that's why we work well together. I have a lot of trouble, and I always have delegating. I'd rather just do it myself and take care of everybody, and I'll do it for you. And my highest percentage was 85. It was tonal memory. So I had a lot of musical background before in my younger years, but I've always loved music. Second highest is verbal memory. So if I call you or you call me, I may ask you a lot of questions, and I'm trying to problem solve and use my experiences in my head to come up with a solution while we're talking, and just to kind of see it all. And usually I write myself notes while you're talking, so I'm not trying to annoy you, but I may ask you a lot of questions. So I can come to a decision without having to call you 10 times, because you'll work it out on the phone. I want to commit to increasing my vocabulary, because that was super low, which I was kind of surprised about, and to slow down. Like Jay, I'm a doer, and I've just transitioned to a new job, so I'm still trying to slow down, and I want to problem solve, but I know that I have to kind of not solve everybody's problems, but to kind of help you create solutions. And my accountability partner will be Ricky, because we're completely opposite, so he always looks at you. And that's how I know I'll be doing good, my vocabulary's better, and I'm calm.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, who would like to go now? Go.
Three things I would like my colleagues and staff should know about me. I like to see everybody be successful, so I'm a motivator, I'm an encourager. I am an 85% introvert, which I do that, but most people I work with don't. Because once my feet hit the pavement, I'm gone. And that's just me. Good morning, how you doing? But I can feel it today when I get in my car in the evening. I'm like, ooh, why am I so tired? But I'm just opposite of who I really am. And like, if I want to talk to my husband at home, if I come to him and he don't want to talk to me, so when he comes to me later, he wants to talk, I'm like, I got to do this now. I will call you back in here later when I want to talk to you. But music plays a big part of my life. I love music. I love to sing. So most of the time during the hall, I'm in the hall, I'm whistling, I'm singing. I have to remember, I can't sing everything. But that's just part of me. And when we just started children's church at our school, at our church, and the second and third Sundays, I am just on fire. And everybody's like, my son's like, Mama, can you calm down? Can you calm down just a little bit? You just want to go back to children's church, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. But that's just part of me. That makes me me. The thing I want to focus on in the next 3 months, we had started a walking team with the admin team, and I understand why it was important. In the last few weeks, maybe a month, we haven't been able to do that. So that is our goal, to get back to walking, because that is our opportunity to talk about our day, to release, and that still get that activity in, because I'm 85% kinesthetic.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. 3 things to know about me. I interact easily with others. I'm a generalist, specialist, extrovert. I'm high in observation, so I use that ability to read facial expressions and body language easily. I like to plan ahead, and I think because I'm an extrovert, I have to be very purposeful of not immediately spewing my opinion or beliefs, just right then. So I have to be very conscious about not saying anything because I don't want to seem indecisive. And I also want to be very purposeful if I'm giving an opinion because I don't want to hurt anybody's feeling. So that's what I'm going to be working on, is being very purposeful and giving myself think time. And what I notice is a lot of people like to come to me right then and run something by me because they want an answer right then. You know, they're just hoping you say yes, and, you know, and I think they know that about me, that I'm, you know, but I've been trying and practicing very hard on, if you need an answer now, it's no. But if you'll email me, I promise I'll get back with you. I just need a little bit of think time. I can't process, you know, that quickly. That's what I'm trying to do before I give any type of opinion. And so I think I will achieve that when they stop hitting me up first thing in the morning. Because I'm not a morning person. So I haven't even finished half a cup of coffee. I don't even know what you're saying. Because apparently anything tonal or anything, I'm like 10%. So, but I'm a high visual learner. So, you know, an email would probably be great because, in all honesty, if they talk to me, it is important. I'm very big on relationships. So I probably forget half of them and don't even realize I forget half of them because I can't remember they've even said anything to me. So I might be getting ugly looks, and I can read faces. So, but that's
All right, well, thank you. Thank you. We're down to our last two.
Go ahead.
All right, three things my colleagues and staff should know about me. 95% introvert, but like Sherry, my colleagues certainly would not know that. I certainly need emails and texts to help me to remember sometimes, and I know you guys know this when you're walking down the hallway and like, oh, can I just tell you this, or I need to tell you this, or can you help me with this? And then if I've got like a pen or something in my hand, I'll go back to my office and I've got like stuff written everywhere. So as I get those things done, I just clean them up. But emails and text messages certainly work better for me. And then the third thing is, I'm not good at like building things. Like I can build things, but I really do need you to just, that clean slate that we talked about, don't give me, I can't work from that. I need a few headliners, and then just give me a few, don't give me too many, and then I can just take it and do what needs to be done from there. One thing that I will commit to focusing on is letting people know what they need to know. We talked about that so that they don't have to fill in what I'm saying. And I think that a lot of times in our roles, especially as APDs, you might want me to give a kid a certain consequence and you don't understand why. Maybe I didn't give him ISS or whatever, but that's because I've sat down and I've learned like 20 other things that you really as a teacher don't have the time to learn. So that I may not give him that consequence that you really feel looking on the outside I should have given them. So a lot of times just following up with them and just saying, hey, this is the reason why I didn't do that. And sometimes I just don't have the time to do it. So that's one of the things I think that I need to work better on. And I'll do this by simply just, you know, letting them know, hey, you know, this is what happened. And basically I'll have to hold myself accountable. And I'll know I've done that when I can just walk away and say, hey, I've done that and I'm not worried about it anymore. Don't have to worry about it anymore. So that's it.
Thank you. Now the last one.
I went last for a reason. I have a special ed background, so I'm very patient. So, just for everybody to know that. So I'm a 95% extrovert. I'm a very visual, hands-on person. Very good with numbers and very social. My wife tells me that I talk too much. One thing that I want to commit to focusing on is being able to multitask. And I plan to do this by the end of the year, and I hold myself accountable to my principal and my wife. And I will know that I have achieved this by verbal praise from my principal and my wife.
Okay. Well, I very much appreciate you all taking the time to do this last activity because I think it prepares you to even go back and talk to your principals, to talk to other colleagues. You know, you're not going to sit down with the whole profile and that kind of stuff, but there's definitely stuff that you can use out of this and you'll know how best to use it. Another thing I would encourage you to do is you can think about how this interacted with what you found in StrengthsFinder. I went ahead and took the StrengthsFinder myself, and it's very interesting how they line up. And so you can see how your natural abilities really sort of support the results of that as well. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And you know, this stuff stays with you and you get to use it over and over and over again. So best of luck with everything that you do. Yeah.
Will it be online? So we can access it? Okay.
Forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
All right, team, my introverted self's too tired to get up and close this out. All right, on a serious note, I didn't mean to tell you at the beginning, our executive cabinet is attending a conference. That is why we video record this, because they want to see. They invested that 3 hours like you all did. So just know that's why they're not here tonight. They're all at a conference. Our next class is Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, wear green. And we'll focus on instructional leadership, and this will be the student services perspective. So we'll spend a couple sessions on instructional leadership, so we'll learn it from a student services side next month, and the month after we'll come in from a teach and learning aspect, okay?